Hi, my name is Zina Saro-Wiwa. I am an artist. I live in Los Angeles. I'm Nigerian, born in Nigeria, but brought up in the UK from the age of one. So I've been in British most of my life, but Nigerian too. And then I moved to New York 10, 11 years ago, and I've been living in New York for 10 years. But then within that time, I spent 3 years in Nigeria building my practice, building an art space called Boys Quarters Project Space, and actually getting the seeds of my practice, which actually in Los Angeles, I'm now expanding on in a really interesting way. So that's me. My work with the Sao Paulo Biennale is about the psychic space that is the forest. When I heard that African forests were burning at an even faster rate than the Amazon, it made me wonder about the relationship we have with the forests and how the stories we tell about the forest affect its fate. The Amazon has had incredible PR, so its devastation cuts deep and causes global outrage. But the African forest does not enjoy the same advocacy. Our psychological relationship with the forest affects how we treat it. So I think of this work as a long-term study, but for Sao Paulo, I'll be presenting some of my meditations about the forest and storytelling. I'm interested in why forests have inspired the number of stories and myths it has done all over the world. I really like this idea that trees eavesdrop on humans and suggest things to us. I always think of trees as participants. They themselves are storytellers. But I've started my meditation focusing on a particular tree in my ancestral homeland, Ogoniland, and expressing something elemental of the relationship between human and tree. Looking at the ways in which trees might speak and also how they view the world. So this thing is like, it's from the perspective of a human, but also from the perspective of a tree. And I depicted the tree perspective in this kind of red, drowned X-ray kind of feel. And it's really interesting because after I decided to use the colour red in the video, kind of inspired by the red hat of the figure in question and the idea of seeing the world through the red hat, I read that trees see red light. A photoreceptor protein called phytochrome B detects red light. So in some ways, trees had communicated that to me. I like to think that anyway. And then the idea of secrecy in the forest is also important to me. And I'll be doing an installation featuring live bodies for Sao Paulo Biennale, COVID permitting. I've done a lot of work around masquerade culture, but the performers disappear in the forest and that's where they practice and create songs. But so many other things happen in the forest. It's a site of worship, a site to denounce people, share secrets. It's where in the past twin babies were tragically left to die. The forest is a place to hide and a place to transform. And I'm hoping that we can invest the African forest with more stories and more linkages and to sort of grow it in the public consciousness. Now, whilst I do believe that some looted objects like Benin bronzes and Ethiopian crowns absolutely should be returned, I'm actually far more concerned with the storytelling they engage in when they are back in Nigeria or Ethiopia. I care about what the objects will say when they are subsequently loaned from Nigeria and Ethiopia to Australia, Brazil, Rwanda, the UK and France. It is storytelling and not geography that is a long-term matter of consequence. The same problems of storytelling that exist in Western institutions can absolutely be replicated in African ones. Everyone's talking about restitution right now and returning these objects. And the thing for me is just like, oh, that's quite interesting because I quite like it when I see like Ogoni art in these spaces. And but also I'd done this show with a local traditional artist called Promise Lagiri. And, you know, just realizing that the work that I was showing would have been deemed inauthentic in the West was very interesting to me because you know all the work that I do at boys' quarters and in Nigeria, I'm trying to build our cultural capital. That's the central thing. You know, it's about our storytelling and it's about building cultural capital. That I mean, I don't know about the political capital, but at least we can build cultural capital locally because that is the net. This is the you know the more cultural capital you have, the more it can translate into power, and the less likely people are to fuck with you. So for me, it's very important to like build cultural capital and know that you know we know ourselves and we have a sense of self, and also to like make sure other people have linkages to the you know to the region that isn't just about like oil and its despoilment and what it does to the region. So you know, it's about attracting different kinds of energies, different kinds of people to a place. I don't just want to attract journalists and oil workers and troublemakers and NGO workers, because they don't really lead to anything that's generative, not really. I want to attract different kinds of voices, different kinds of energies, kind of more generative forces to the region, and also produce generative forces locally. And we also have to have respect for the people that make this art and see them as artists, not just craftsmen. So, and we're looking at the problematics of that as well, but then also looking at the spiritual heritage. There's an ontological problem with these works, in that we say, well, they're said to have this power. And, we talk about, in the West, we might talk about the kind of the African belief systems that, materialists might think of as like backwards in some ways, but the thing is, it's just like, okay, I mean, and I don't necessarily believe that either. I'm aware of many layers of life, and that's Brazil's fault, by the way. I totally was made aware of the spiritual side of life in Brazil, in Bahia. It wasn't like in Nigeria or England in my upbringing. I had nothing to do with it until I went to Bahia and I learned all this stuff. So I became aware of it for that reason. And so, I think a lot more people are beginning to be aware of these other sides of life, and it's getting to be a bigger conversation. And so that aspect of the conversation isn't also in the work, and you choose not to respect it, not really. So there's always this weird thing where you don't really respect the work, and you only respect it because you've deemed it, you've invested it, as a European have invested it with certain properties and values, but it has nothing to do with the African. So for me, it's not useful to me. That's not very useful for me. That doesn't work for me. So I kind of want to untangle that a little bit, and let's start again. I sing in the dark. I sing all the time, but I understand. I understand that you're saying that despite, say, political darkness, you still want to sing. But I do think that a lot of really great art comes out of that dark moment, and the singing is the light. So singing in the dark seems like the most sensible way of responding to things. I just think at this moment where we are now, it's really hard. It's very hard for me. And in America, just like what's going on is so scary. I don't even know how to respond to it. And it's been a difficult moment generally because I'm not comfortable with an activism, and I suppose it's because of what happened to my father. That might be part of it, but it's just not my style. It's just not how I deal with the problem. So and I think that's exemplified in that film I made, wearing the mask, or even just my approach generally going to Nigeria to be an artist. I'm not interested in sort of joining a campaign, not necessarily. I mean, never say never, but for me it was more like, we have to attack this problem at the root. So, and let other energies and let other ideas and other forces in. You don't control the root of that journey. That's why I'm not political in that sense. I just don't think that the information and the strategies are necessarily from that infinite resource. And that's the only way I know how to survive. And, and I think I've always been a little bit sort of suppressed also because there's been so many deaths in my family, just weird ones outside my father, just like people being picked off like suddenly, for, prematurely. And it's horrifying. So I live in a state of existential horror. That's where I live. So I have to sing in order to just be alive. So that is my only way to actually be alive. So that's why you won't catch me being an activist in that sense, because I don't get any sort of like joy, or it's not foreign or interesting to me. And I think that people get a lot out of doing that. And maybe I have also benefited from certain people's activism for sure. But I just don't want my strategies to be discounted. And I actually think these strategies need to be raised up more. And I do think that academics, we have a lot of work to do in the academic arena. Universities have to shift, museums have to change, and that's why I'm really happy to be part of this particular Biennale, because the conversations that we had when we started was just like, it just validated so much for me. I felt like a lot of my practice wasn't necessarily understood. Say in New York, for example, I don't want to malign my experience in New York. It was really good in the beginning, but then it's gone into a place that it wasn't resonating with me, and then I moved to LA, and I don't know, I just got into myself, and then somehow you guys came into, we met online, but the kind of conversations you were having and the way that you were saying that artists had to inform the story was just like, this is exactly what we're talking about, this is the thing that matters. It's drawing from that external resource, that infinite knowledge, and not feeling that you have to be in control because you know that you're not in control, but trusting that you're going to get these outcomes that will in fact save us. And I think it's possible. And I think art will be a part of that, and an important engine in that process.